How can we foster creators and innovators with AI? It's my favorite question. I'm Tom Vander Ark. You're listening to the Getting Smart podcast, and today we're joined by a friend of the show, Rachelle Dene Poth, a teacher, author, and edtech expert. Rachelle has a great new book out, How to Teach AI, Weaving Strategies and Activities into Any Content Area. Rachelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tom. Glad to be here.
This fall, it'll be 29 years. Is that right?
I stopped counting a little while ago, but I think you're pretty close. I know it's up there for sure. Yeah, long time.
It is awesome. This is one of the things that we really appreciate about you. You're a prolific author, but the fact that your advice and observations are always rooted in classroom work makes you super special, and I think valued nationally. So we appreciate your 3 decades of teaching and the fact that you're learning out loud with and for the rest of us. So Riverview School District it's right outside Pittsburgh, right?
Pittsburgh, yeah. It's about 15 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh, so not too bad of a drive.
Are you still teaching Spanish?
Yes, Spanish, all levels. And then I have a course that's for 8th graders, STEAM emerging technology, that I've been teaching for about 8 years, and it's great for me because I love technology, and it's fun to look through the eyes of an 8th grader because I think back to my 8th grade self. So keeps everything interesting and fun each day.
I have a 726-day streak going on Duolingo.
Nice.
No habla español.
I hear that a lot too.
What's your take on language acquisition in AI? Or how much do you use it in class? Are you excited about it? Is it largely a bust? What's your take?
Yeah, so it's been interesting because I feel like as a language educator, we've eased into this whole AI explosion more than maybe other educators, but not necessarily realizing it because students have had access to Google Translate and other tools like it for years and years. That's not something new. For many of the years I've been teaching, students have, hey, I can take a picture of my paper and I can have it translate right into Spanish or English. I'm like, yay, that's awesome. So we've seen this coming a little bit. So I've been excited about it. I did actually work on the the hands-on project guides. I helped to write one of the lessons in for the electives. I think it was like 2020 we did this, and it was focused on the use of a tool like Google Translate. And my students were so shocked that I was letting some of them use the translator, but they quickly realized that it doesn't always understand human speech, let alone teenage slang or context. And so it's helping them to understand how to use it. And for me in my classroom with the AI, especially in this past year and a half, I have used it even more, getting it into the students' hands to help them to see how to use it to enhance and not replace their learning and to use it responsibly, because I don't know that they're getting those same opportunities in other classrooms. I'm sure that they're starting to, but I feel like because of my experience with it, that I want to see what it looks like, and I want to show them you can do this on your own, but sometimes you can use AI to help you along the way. And so I've been excited. I'm not going to lie, when ChatGPT came out end of 2022, I was 3 hours on a Saturday night, like testing every prompt. I'm like, oh goodness, they can translate everything. They could already do that. But it's been exciting to work with teachers and see what their responses are to AI and then how they're using it.
Well, the translation capabilities just keep getting better and they're nearly immediate. Is that going to long-term reduce demand for language learning, for language acquisition? What's your take?
I would hope that it doesn't, because we definitely need educators. We definitely need language educators in all around the world because there is a shortage of those. But I had a conversation with somebody recently about the use of these different tools. And I said, well, you know what? No matter how good the tool gets, there are more than 7,000 languages that are spoken throughout parts of the world. Granted, some of those are spoken only by a handful of people, but the benefit of some of those things are for languages which are not offered in school. Some schools only offer French and Spanish, or maybe an online program, and you might be able to get some Mandarin Chinese, maybe some Italian. But if somebody is told when they're in their career or they get an opportunity in college or at any point in life that, hey, we're going to send you to this place and you have to figure out how to get around and you don't know the language. So are you going to learn it really quickly? Are you going to take a translator with an actual person with you? Or do you leverage the technology to help you to at least get started? And I feel like that language acquisition, regardless of the language, we're going to have to continue to learn languages in some format because people that go into legal, medical, you name it, there's applicability to that and helps them to develop those skills. So I hope language teachers and the acquisition does not go away, but I hope that people figure out how to use some of those tools to enhance and support them in their learning of that language.
How would you learn a new language? And as a language teacher and a tech expert, how would you learn a new language? And is it different if it's an adjacent language like French or Portuguese compared to Chinese? What would your
Yes.
personal strategy be?
It is difficult. And I started with French in high school and college. And then when I graduated, I could not get a job just teaching French. So I went back and got the Spanish. And that's where my interest in the law grew. And then I started where I've been teaching. But in the process, also, I started to try to teach myself Italian. I had the audio tapes, I had the book, I took a class. And I could understand some of it, but some of it was even a little bit difficult for me, even though there are commonalities. Portuguese, I can read, but when I look at other languages, say Russian, which I think I love to hear it being spoken. I have a couple of friends who came from Russia, and when they speak, I just think it's beautiful. Same with Chinese. I have a friend that speaks Chinese, and I love hearing when she speaks to her family. But for me, when I look at those languages, I think because the way I've been trained learning the other Latin-based Romance languages over the years, I cannot process that. And it's really difficult, no matter how hard I try, to learn those types of languages. So I think that when you have different tools available, like you had mentioned, like Duolingo is one that you can use and learn in little increments. I think it's awesome to have those possibilities, but now we do have a lot of tools available to students. But I tell mine, look, when I was in your grade, we didn't have Google Translate. And I drop a big, heavy dictionary on their desk. And there's your Google Translate from the 1980s and 90s. And they actually really liked it at the end of the school year. They're like, I said, open the book, turn the pages, find the words, navigate the meaning. And it's just a tool. The dictionary is just a tool. A person having a conversation is just a tool. It's in how you use it so that you are actually going to develop those skills. So I say to my students all the time, do you want to know this just for now? Or do you want to know this on a long term? Is it matter to you now? Or maybe in 5 years, is it going to matter that you didn't put the time in now and now you have to make up for it? So lots of considerations.
That's great advice. We're talking to our friend, Rachelle Dene Poth. She's a longtime Getting Smart contributor. I bet you've written on Getting Smart as well as other areas for more than 10 years. It's been a while.
It has been a long time. I was
We,
talking about my start. That's how I got started with AI was because of Getting Smart. I talked about it. I talk about it a couple of times a week, Tom. I'll be honest.
I think you and I spotted AI in about end of 2015, and we both had this, holy cow, this is going to be a big deal
Yep.
moment. And we both started shifting our gaze to tracking what was happening. We love your new book, Rachelle, How to Teach AI, Weaving Strategies and Activities into Any Content Area. This must be like your sixth or seventh book, or am I a couple behind?
This one's the ninth of my own. Yeah.
That's awesome. We haven't talked about this for a while, but the RDP productivity function, do you still use a lot of speech to text when you write?
I do. And I love that you said the RDP because I tell people I'm like notorious RDP. That name was given to me by one person named Tom. But I do. And I've done that for years. And it's good on so many levels, just for even thinking out loud and reflecting. But I probably started that 8 years ago. And the first time
Right.
somebody saw me doing it, they were like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing a blog. And they said, what? Doesn't make any sense. But that capability, it's not perfect. It doesn't pick up every single word that you say, the way that you enunciate words. It's a little bit different, but it is getting better and is improving over time. So the writing I do is sometimes because I've started by talking about it and then I clean it up.
All right, we're going to dive into our new book, How to Teach AI. You do an intro chapter and then you do some ethics, but I want to have you talk about chapter 3 and 4 are the guts of the book around the impact of AI in education and putting generative AI to work. So, what's your take on what leading schools systems will do, not just next year, but let's say the next 2 years? What are the primary ways that you think leading systems are going to make good use of AI?
I think the biggest thing, and I was just speaking last week actually about AI in the law, is an area that I've been doing some research in. And my doctoral work was focused.
You're also an attorney.
Yes, I know. I love
Yes.
school. I love learning. And I just finished the doctoral work in May, and my focus was on the need for professional development specific to AI, but also encompassing other areas for teachers to stay up with all these emerging technologies. And when I had spoken at the AI symposium, it was the first time doing a session on AI in the law. And I think a big question is, what are the policies? What are the guidelines for teachers to use? And there's a lot of uncertainty about that, but we're seeing more and more states adopting their K through 12 guidelines. As of today, beginning of August, the 21st state now, at the end of 2023, there were 2 states. So now teachers, school systems can look to their state for information, as well as those other organizations that we're aware of too. But I think that's a big starting point. And then looking at what teachers are using in the classroom, what guidelines and things are in place. What do teachers need? What questions do they have? What training is offered for them? I think that's a big focus for a lot of schools and a lot of the administrators that I've spoken to. It's like, where do we begin? How do we provide for all of the teachers, especially when there's so many options out there? And with elementary teachers, I hear often too is I don't know how they do all they do because they are covering so many different areas in their teaching and they have so many responsibilities and fitting this in. But because AI is not going away, I've had some really funny conversations and comments about what do you think of when you think about AI, or why do we need to learn about AI as educators or as anybody for that matter at this point? And I get a lot of really interesting answers. Mostly it's not going anywhere. We're surrounded by it. But for the younger students all the way up, I think schools really need to think about what is available so that teachers feel supported, that students and families also feel supported in knowing that what is being used in the classroom, the guidance that's provided is going to keep them and everybody in that space safe, especially with something like AI that brings in all of these extra concerns about data privacy and safety. So the short answer is big picture, starting with the training and the information and the guidelines, and then involving a lot of different people in the conversations that are ongoing and that they evaluate and conduct audits and do a lot of those things throughout the year because it's changing so fast. Every day there's thousands of AI apps added, not all specific to education, but a lot of concerns and being mindful and intentional about planning ahead of time. And somebody in my session said proactive, not reactive, also.
Are you more bullish on AI as a student learning assistant or as a teacher assistant?
I don't know. I can never pick one answer for that. I don't know that I'm either. I like being able to show both sides of it for teachers, especially because there's never enough time to do things. And there's a lot of tasks involved in being an educator, some of which we know could be replaced and have been already replaced by AI. I think the prediction 2 years ago was like 40% of clerical tasks by elementary teachers can be replaced by AI. And I shared that, and I got a lot of cheers in the room from the teachers that were there that were elementary teachers. But the other component of it is students need to understand how to use it. And I've said this a couple of times, and it only recently really occurred to me, but when ChatGPT came out and students were able to, whether or not under our guidance, they could access it outside of school, they didn't really know how to use it. It was just this, wow, it can do my homework, it can write an essay. And everybody was scrambling. And then maybe they were seniors and they had a half a year, no guidance. And then they went out into the workforce, into higher education, using and relying on a tool like ChatGPT. And who knows what kind of consequences might have come from that? What information did they share? So I'm really about like, how do we get students to see it, to use it in a safe way that they're going to build their skills over time on their own that they need to, but know that there's something else that they can use and interact with that can enhance, like I said before, and not replace and take away their opportunities for their own learning and struggling with learning, because that's essential too.
Do you advise schools to use large language models directly, or are you a fan of Magic School, all the apps on what are becoming popular AI app platforms?
Yeah, kind of both. I think through the lens of safety. And I've said this, I do sessions where I talk about ChatGPT and other large language models, and we do some different prompts, and then we'll go into some of the platforms. Magic School I've used. Another one I really like is Eduate. They're based out of Pittsburgh. They're in the classroom teaching. I don't know how they do it. like, but I say you shouldn't have to go on a scavenger hunt to find out what's happening with the information you're putting in. There should be disclaimers. You should see the
Yeah,
privacy policy. And that for me is the most important. Now, for a teacher, if I'm sitting here working at home and I'm using it to generate lesson plans, ideas, whatever, and I'm not putting any of my students' information or any of my personally identifiable information at risk, then that's fine. But when it comes into the classroom, what are we using that we know that we can guarantee, especially when families or anybody else might say, hey, are you in compliance with all of these relevant laws? That we don't have to worry about it, that we know that we are, and that even if it says we don't use your data, okay, that's great. And this is the attorney bar going, we don't use it, but are there other people that are in our platforms that could then be using it? So
good.
I focus on safety, and then why? What's the why you're using it for? It always comes back to that question pre all these AI, generative AI, ChatGPT things as well.
I was talking to Chris Hagel from Peninsula School District here in our area near Tacoma, and he also had this and both answer where they have some beautiful courses that they develop for all their teachers that develop AI literacy, and he said they have about 75% penetration with Magic School, that almost all of their teachers are using Magic School as well as directly using the LLM. So I
Yeah.
we might see more of that and both. Rochelle, I want to talk about chapter 5 because I stood up and cheered when I got to chapter 5, where you talk about fostering creators and innovators with AI. How,
Yeah.
how do you do that? What's that about? Why is it important? And give us some examples and stories.
Yeah, so it's funny because years ago when I first started to do presentations at technology conferences locally or wherever, one of the sessions that I had focused on moving students from consumers to creators and innovators, and just how do we do that? And I had things like project-based learning, for example, where it's uncomfortable for some students because they're like, wait, I have to decide what to do and figure out what to learn and how to share that learning. And so with this focus, I think, and in my own classroom too, I've done this a lot. People tend to think, your students think that the person at the front of the room or wherever you're standing is the expert. And for years, if I didn't know the answer to a question they asked about a Spanish word or something with coding, for example, I did feel uncomfortable because I'm like, I'm supposed to know everything. But then I thought, if I'm only teaching them what I know, I'm limiting their potential for growth. And so that's when I started to shift from the I'm talking at you in the consumption to, all right, I've given you some ideas. Now, what can you do with that? So here's a tool, here's an activity, whatever we've done. Oh, it didn't work out well. How could you improve it? And get them involved to think, to collaborate, and build those skills that, of course, are essential and have been the essential 21st century, however you want to call them. We're well into it. But then beyond that, sparking that interest for them so that maybe they find a tool, like maybe they design a chatbot that has a specific purpose, for example, giving students back to the project based learning. Where a couple of years ago, I was involved in this event locally where students came in for a week and it was focused on belonging in STEM and giving students a chance to explore artificial intelligence, augmented reality, coding, you name it. And then the end of it was a culminating project where they had to work together and come up with a way to use one of those technologies. AI, of course, was one of them to solve some big problem like sustainability. We looked at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, for example, and you saw these kids who never met, then they learned about these topics over a matter of a couple of days and then designed these solutions to these challenges being faced in the world. And so for me, I think about, I just get them started. Then they work together. I give them some kind of little twist to something, and then where do they take it from there, and fostering opportunities for them to do that. And so that's the essence of that chapter, is finding a resource that gets them thinking about something a little bit differently where there's a need, and then how can they leverage their knowledge and their classmates, in that, in our case, to build their knowledge in that area to do good with that technology.
Two relatively recent developments I'd love to have you talk about. One is just relational AI. We're seeing some relational AI move into the support and guidance space in both high school and in college apps, but outside of school in the counseling space and also in the informal space. We just saw a Friends app introduced that seems particularly creepy to me. But relational AI, and then secondly, the voice interface that what OpenAI previewed recently was a spectacularly good voice interface. And it just strikes me that that combined threshold of relational AI with a voice interface signals new and different horizon for us and for young people. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? Are you excited or freaked out by this development?
I would say a little in between, because
Yeah.
when I was at the and I keep up with the news and I've read them, and I saw people posting on Twitter about, there was a tweet that somebody, or Twitter or X, a tweet that somebody had posted a couple of days ago, and it was talking about, he was having this conversation, and he's, I don't need to talk to my friends anymore. Once this is released, like, I can just talk to it. They'll tell me everything I need to know, and it's not going to get mad or anything. Like, it was just like interesting to hear that part of the conversation. I think it's interesting, especially if you want a thought partner or somebody who is just there by themselves, they're traveling and just a conversational. It's not as far fetched, I don't think, as people may think at first, because if I remember back to AOL and chat rooms, and now people who have never heard about those chat rooms, if you think about, oh, you were actually having a conversation in this space online with somebody that you couldn't see, and you didn't know if they lived 3 blocks from you or 3,000 miles away from you, or forming relationships through social media networks too. Like, you become friends with people that you may never have met in person. And then all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, we already know each other. And so even though this is AI, sometimes it may be hard to tell if you were actually having a conversation. There's a website I found, human or AI, and you have to play the game to guess if you are actually talking to somebody like that. So I was a little bit, oh, I don't know how I feel about this, but that part of it, it's not so new, because there were stories a couple of years ago about people having partners, best friendships, you name it, with AI, and it was just for that conversation. And then now with this, we'll see where it goes, how it takes off. I want to get a chance to try it out. I was excited just when my own app on my phone was reading the response to me. I thought that in itself was cool.
This spring in Cajon Valley School District, Cajon Valley USD in San Diego, I saw a number of middle school students using Schooljoy to have a path mentorship conversation with a bot, an avatar of their choosing, so they could pick someone that looked like them in a profession of interest. So for a young person that was interested in nursing, they could talk to a person of their choosing. They could even dial up the year, whether it was in the present or 5 years from now. But they could have these really useful dialogues with someone in a profession that they were interested in. That would be really difficult to set up logistically in real life. And as Cahoon always does, students would have these conversations, and then they would have a reflection about what they learned, what that meant. And so that to me felt like a really useful use of relational AI with a voice interface. And so I'm excited about the support and guidance potential here. But as we both remarked, there's all sorts of ways that this could get both creepy and dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the example that you just said too, because sometimes having those conversations with somebody, which is another reason why I always like things like virtual reality, where you could immerse students in an experience that might be otherwise costly, dangerous, you name it, but it's going to expose them to that experience or engage them in a way that's different than what we're able to offer in our schools.
Um, Brave New World. It's interesting for school policymakers. I think it's hard to keep up with how fast this is moving. Do you see schools generally responding well and staying open to possibility, or are the most schools that you encounter still in reactive mode and locking down usage?
Yeah, it has varied. I see more that are receptive to it now than they were 6 months ago, and definitely a year ago heading into last school year. I also am surprised by the number of teachers throughout the United States. I haven't spoken to all the teachers in the United States, but when I do sessions or go to conferences, I always use a survey to see, have you had training? What are you aware of? And there are things that are in use in our schools. You mentioned Magic School and other tools like it. I use Eduate. There's a lot of them out there, but that a lot of us, I just figure everybody knows about them and how to use them and how to bring them into the classroom and safely and all of that. But with schools, I've been contacted by some different schools across the country in some states where I've never been. So that's been exciting, that
Yeah.
are really seeking guidance on how do we train teachers? That's their number one. They have some policies set up, and in some cases, they're in states where policies have been enacted. I know California and Oregon were the first two, and it's moving around. So administrators at least have that to look to, or larger organizations that have toolkits available as well. So I think it's a little bit easier right now to say, oh, okay, we can look to this toolkit that's been put together by Teach AI, for example, and see sample administrator guidelines and educator guidelines. And oh, there's these states that have policies. Hey, our state is one of them. And to be able to have that as a frame of reference compared to a year ago when there wasn't anything. And they were trying to figure out what the best thing was to do for their teachers, their students, and the whole school community, including families. So I feel like it's set in now. There was an article that I had read and people were referring to, there was even a graphic where they called it like the honeymoon phase of generative AI, where people were just like, oh, this is great. And what do we do? Is all these awesome things and you're excited about it. But then it's settled in a little bit. Okay, it's not going away. It's here. We actually have to do something about it. So what do we do? And the conversations have started, the trainings are in place, and people have a plan of action more than they did last school year at this time, or even 6 months ago, or at the end of the school year. So I think it's moving in the right direction, but it was not, I did not think it would happen overnight. It's going to be evolving.
As you think about the journey that was this book, Rochelle, who or what was really helpful as you studied this rapidly emerging subject? Any shout outs for people along the way that helped you on this learning journey?
Yeah, you for starters. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you, but that is the truth. Because for me, when I started blogging for Getting Smart years ago, was writing about a conference and things I did, and that was very easy. But this time, 7 years ago, the calendar came out for 2018, and AI was the topic for January, and so I dove in, and that was my first article. So definitely you and the team at Getting Smart for sure, because I've had many opportunities over the years to write. Even in 2020, when I helped do some research with ChatGPT 3 back then, and you had all these things, I was like, what is happening? They did what with the books of the Game of Thrones? It's been awesome to see that evolve. So that is a shout out. ISTE, because they had a course piloted that I was able to pilot, and that course was absolutely phenomenal and gave me more
Right.
confidence. Yeah,
You spoke at ISTE a month ago in Denver
I
on this.
did. Hard to believe this time is just flying. And so it's been a great 7 years so far and counting. And then just my doctoral work, because again, it was focused on AI, and the faculty that kind of gave me the feedback and helped me with the research. And just, it takes a lot of work. You can't even keep up with. There's just so much. But my whole motivation is always, what can I do to help others to get started with it in a way that feels comfortable? And so those are my initial shout outs for sure, because if it wouldn't have been for that first article, and I tell that story all the time, I refer to the things like C-3PO and Terminator were the number one answers for what do you think about it for AI? But it has changed a lot, but some things are still the same in some regards. So thank you.
So I see that book, Teach AI, How to Teach AI, sitting right next to you. You must be well into book number 10. What's it about?
Yeah, book number 10. And I love the title because I made it up on the way home from school one day. And I'll tell you what it's about. It's about a little bit about AI, augmented virtual reality, blockchain, metaverse, NFT, cybersecurity, and all of these emerging technologies that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. Again, because I learned about, thankful to you for saying, hey, do you want to learn about this? Okay. And the title of it is called What the Tech?
Mm.
Because driving home, I thought, there's all this stuff. There's AI, there's this. What the tech is, and then I went, that could be a title for a book. So that will be available. It is in peer review with ISTE early 2025. You can see it on Amazon. The cover is there. But yeah, it's exciting because there's a lot coming to us in education on varying topics, and teachers need to know. So I am going to do my best to inform you what the tech is up with the blockchain and metaverse, and especially cybersecurity. I added that because of all of the increase this past year, especially with like ransomware and phishing and all of that, for teachers to understand how to protect themselves, their students, and the families. So it's fun.
That's beautiful. That's a very RDP title. I love it. It's catchy. It's timely, as you always are. Thanks for being with us. It's good to see you. And speaking of shout outs to the Getting Smart team, our producer, Mason Pasha, has been leading our exploration of AI and always helps publishing great contributions by RDP. So thanks to him and the whole Getting Smart team that makes this possible. Until next week, keep learning, keep leading, and keep using AI to innovate for equity.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.